Perfect. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Nutrition with Elena. I'm going to turn it over to you. Um,
Great.
it's yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Hoping you're enjoying this beautiful day outside. Some nice sunshine. Today, we're going to be talking about minerals and just doing a nice overview on minerals because I think, maybe not things we've heard of before, but we definitely are hearing a lot more about minerals kind of out in the media and different places talking about magnesium and potassium and all of those different minerals. We're just going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that today. And then at the end, we're going to do two recipes. So we're going to do a spinach salad with lime vinaigrette and then almond banana energy bites. So we can get started on our PowerPoint. Where'd my share screen button go? Here we go. And feel free to chime in with any questions as we go. So today we're going to talk about what are minerals, some highlights of certain minerals, and then some research on them. So minerals are inorganic elements found in soil and water. They're essential to our bodies. Those specific ones that we need are essential to our bodies. And they're important and needed for bone health, electrolyte balance, our immune system, our hormone regulation, and many more functions. So we break them into major minerals and trace minerals. Major minerals are any mineral that we require more than 100 milligrams of per day. So those major minerals are calcium, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and sodium. And then the trace minerals are iron, zinc, copper, iodine, and selenium. We're going to start with the major minerals, and we're going to start with a very important one, and that is calcium. So calcium is our most abundant mineral in our bodies. Obviously, we know it's important for bone health, but it also has a role in our muscle function, our nerve transmission, and blood clotting. There is some research too that calcium intake at adequate amounts may reduce the risk for colorectal cancers. Now, our recommended dietary allowances, as we kind of approach adulthood, they're around the same ballpark for most people. But for men and women 19 to 50 years old, they're about 1,000 milligrams a day. And then for as women are over 51, they approach 1,200 milligrams a day. And I like to think of calcium kind of in buckets throughout the day. So if we know we need 1,200 milligrams of calcium, I like to think of like 4 buckets of calcium every day. So I would always say like 1 or 2 of those buckets is probably either a dairy product or a fortified non-dairy milk or something like that. And then your other bucket is kind of just all of these other foods that you might eat in the course of the day that are going to kind of equal like 300 to 400 milligrams of calcium. And then the other bucket could be food or dairy, or it might be like a small supplement. So I know a lot of people, have been recommended to take maybe a calcium supplement by their doctors. I don't generally think people need like the 1,200 milligrams a day that, has been prescribed over the years. But I definitely think there can be a place for supplements to kind of fill in some of those gaps from our diet. So it might either be in like our multivitamin with minerals, or we could find it in like those little petite calcium supplements. And they're usually like per pill, like 250 to 300 milligrams a day. But I think also kind of just being aware of some of our food sources is really important too. So we see obviously dairy products all have kind of in that like 300 to 400 milligram range typically. with maybe like cottage cheese being a little lower. And then we see things like tofu is pretty good source, salmon with the bones. So I don't know if you've ever like canned salmon with the bones. The bones, they're not hard like you would picture like a bone like that you're choking on or something. They crumble up. I'm kind of thinking of like when I was down your way, I would get the canned salmon from Trader Joe's and like it has the bones in and it like basically just disintegrates, but it's a good calcium source. And then our dark leafy greens have some calcium, beans, almonds, chia seeds, things like that.
Well, can I ask you, well, I don't know if it's really a question, but I've had issues with my parathyroid, so I have low calcium and I have to work very hard to I do take a calcium supplement, but I'm supposed to get it in food, and I like dairy, but dairy isn't always liking me.
Okay.
So, and then if you don't want to have one of the other milks, it just without I do sometimes have dairy anyway, but it seems just like a challenge if you're not eating dairy to
Yeah,
get.
I would say if you're not having dairy or like a fortified plant milk, it can be a little bit more challenging for sure. Certain types of dairy can be better tolerated than others. Like some people will do kefir, so that's like a fermented milk. And that generally is a little bit better tolerated. Yogurt is, usually a little bit more tolerated than just cow's milk is. Um, there's also like calcium fortified orange juice that you could do. And then kind of focusing in on some of these food sources in addition to whatever supplement they're recommending.
Yeah, the fishes seem like they pack a punch, so
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah,
then you're getting some good omega-3 fats as well with
yeah.
that. And that's a good absorbed. So sometimes like dark leafy greens and things have some things that compete with the calcium absorption a little bit, like the phytic acid that's in that. So it's still great to include them, but we're maybe not getting that full amount from those foods, but certainly from the calcium in the salmon, we would be getting that, that amount would be what we would be getting. There's no
What's competing?
So there's like phytates in dark leafy green vegetables. It's just kind of like a component of them. And it does kind of block a little bit of the absorption of calcium. It's not, all that significant, but I wouldn't focus on just getting your calcium from like dark leafy greens.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Great. And then there's potassium, and most of us don't get enough potassium, honestly. So when we kind of look at our diets in the US, most people are getting more sodium and less potassium, and it should be flipped the other way. So potassium is the most, oh, I have that. No, I didn't take that out. I'm sorry. This is not, I ended up not fixing that slide. Sorry about that. It is not the most abundant. Calcium is, but it does have a role in our muscles and our nerves, and it may reduce the risk of blood pressure and stroke. So just make that notation that first two parts were wrong there. I apologize for that. But we do know that the DASH diet, for example, was a large study that shows that a diet very high in fruits and vegetables, also with some dairy, really helped lower blood pressure in the participants. And it was really that potassium that they believe kind of really helps to lower that blood pressure. So whenever, just in general, always working on trying to increase that potassium and lower the sodium really does have an impact on our blood pressure. So our kind of adequate intakes, it's kind of harder to kind of track this per se, but, you kind of on the food labels, you kind of see like what percentage of potassium things have in them. So the only issue is some people, if they have really impaired kidney function, they typically have to restrict potassium. But for the general population, we just need more of it in our diets usually. As far as food sources, lots of plant-based sources, very high in it. I always find apricots to be a really nice source of potassium. They're just kind of like a little nice, sweet little snack. You could even mix it in with oatmeal or, some sort of like hot cereal, or you might just have it with some nuts. That's a really nice source. Coconut water is a really nice source of potassium. We see lentils and lots of other dried fruits. And then it's also in some animal products. So it's in milk, it's in some like chicken and fish and things like that as well. But really what kicks up our potassium intake is increasing those fruits and vegetables. We don't really ever recommend a potassium supplement unless somebody was specifically prescribed it from their doctor. Sometimes when people are on diuretics for their blood pressure, their potassium will drop too low and their doctors will prescribe some type of potassium supplement. And then magnesium. So magnesium, I don't know if you all are hearing things about magnesium for sleep and all of the, benefits for it. Magnesium is very important. So it's required for our energy metabolism. It can regulate our muscle contraction and relaxation, contributes to our bone density, also supports our nerve function. And some research supports that diets higher in magnesium are associated with a lower risk of type 2 diabetes. So we have a recommended dietary allowances for magnesium. And for most people, in that kind of like 320 to 420 milligram range is what's recommended. But there is an upper limit from supplements. Okay, so this is food sources. And then there's an upper limit from supplements. That's really recommended not to exceed that by much. So that's 350 milligrams of supplemental magnesium. So I think sometimes when people are supplementing with it on their own, they might be getting higher than that. Like, I see people doing like powdered mixes to help with their sleep and all these different things. So just kind of be aware if you've kind of got your own supplement for magnesium that you probably don't need more than what the definitely want lower than the upper limit from our supplements. As far as our food sources, pumpkin seeds are super high, and we're going to be doing a recipe with those today. Chia seeds are really high. So lots of seeds and nuts are a good source of magnesium. So something to just kind of like play around with. And, a lot of people don't get enough from their diets, especially if they're kind of not focusing in on some of these higher ingredients, things that have higher amounts of magnesium. So that is kind of something to pay attention to. Maybe do a small supplement if you don't think you're getting enough in. Then we have phosphorus. So that's not really something that we worry about because most people are getting plenty of phosphorus in their diets. It's very rare that people with adequate food supplies are not getting enough phosphorus. So we find it in dairy, meat, poultry, grains, legumes, veggies, and bakery products. It is important for our bone and teeth formation and also energy metabolism and DNA synthesis. Also something if people have really impaired kidney function is something that they need to limit. And then sodium. Most of Americans are consuming more than enough sodium. It is found naturally in a lot of vegetables and obviously then higher amounts in processed foods and table salt. Iodized, we're going to talk about iodized table salt a little later, but sodium is in all table salts. 1,500 milligrams a day is the recommendation currently. So the Heart Association recommends it to be under 2,300 milligrams a day. And then the dietary, like the USDA dietary recommendations have it at 1,500 milligrams a day. So I generally have people like somewhere in between those two. Research shows that we probably only need about 500 milligrams a day of sodium. So there's definitely a lot of wiggle room. We don't need to work to get 1,500 a day. And I always like recommend, like, anytime we're buying anything off of the shelf, try to find like a low sodium version for you. Our canned beans, we can find low sodium, condiments, you can find low sodium. Just trying to like find it hidden in different things and try to pick the items that maybe have a little bit less. Sodium also helps regulate our fluid balance and very important for nerve function and muscle contraction. Now we'll talk a little bit about the trace minerals. So iodine. Iodine is a little tricky because some people aren't getting enough iodine in their diets. It's not really in our soil as much in this area of the country. So if we're eating a lot of kind of locally grown foods, we're not getting iodine, and we don't really even know like if we're getting foods from other parts of the country, if that soil has any real amount of iodine in it. But we know iodine is essential for our thyroid health, which a lot of people have issues with, right? A lot of people have thyroid problems. And then we know, especially for pregnant women, it's very important for fetal brain and infant brain development. And we find it in iodized salt. So that's something I want to talk a little bit about, because the food companies are no longer using iodized salt when they're making processed foods. I know a lot of people might be doing sea salt and Himalayan salt and all of those things, and none of those have iodine added. So I really do recommend, if people are cooking with salt at home, that they do just kind of get the regular iodized salt that we all used to use and really just use that in the cooking. I know it's not as fun because it doesn't have it's not coarse and it doesn't sprinkle nicely on things, but it's really kind of our best source for iodine. We also find it in seaweed, so that can be a nice snack for people, maybe a couple little strips of like the nori seaweed or something like that. And sushi, like the veggie sushi rolls typically are wrapped in the seaweed, and that's a good source of iodine. Also found in seafood, some smaller amounts in eggs, and then dairy products only if the udders and the machinery is cleaned with an iodine solution. Other than that, there's really none in dairy products. So it is a little bit trickier to get enough iodine in our diets. And then there's selenium, and selenium's an important antioxidant, also helps with our thyroid function and our immune system.
Can I ask a question about iodine and maybe selenium too?
Yeah.
If you don't have a thyroid, do you still have need for iodine?
No, you wouldn't need it if you don't have a thyroid anymore. Yeah.
Okay. And selenium too?
No, you still need selenium. Yeah, just because that is let me double check on the iodine. I'm pretty sure that you don't, but before I say that definitively,
Okay.
I'll shoot an email out to Erica once I
And will you send these slides too?
Yeah, I think you have. Did they post, Erica?
Yeah, they're in the email that
Oh, okay.
you have the Zoom link in.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So selenium also is kind of one of those things that's not as much in the soil as it maybe once was or was in certain parts of the country. But the cool thing is that the Brazil nut, so it's usually that like larger nut that you find in the mixed nut container, has like 2 Brazil nuts have as much selenium as we need in a day. So they're cool. And like I've even seen some people kind of have it as like a supplement. So they'll have their little supplements that they take, and they have their Brazil nuts, for every day. And it's actually like the Brazil nut, the tree that nut comes from is in the Amazon rainforest, and that soil there is just really high in selenium. So that's where it's coming from. So I think that that's pretty cool. Also found in some other animal products such as meat, poultry, and organ meats, also in grains and legumes. And typically all of these things are also in a multivitamin with minerals. So, if you're taking those, you'll kind of see that you probably have a little bit of kind of all of these things in them. And then iron. So iron is essential in transporting oxygen in the body, energy metabolism, immune function. So we have heme iron, and that's the best absorbed form of iron we have available, and that's found in meat and seafood. So it's kind of like our animal source of iron. And then we have non-heme iron, and that's found in our plant foods. And what we can do to enhance the absorption of that non-heme iron is to consume it with something that has vitamin C in it. So peppers, citrus, strawberries, potatoes, broccoli, all of those, like most fruits and vegetables, have a good amount of vitamin C. So when we're eating kind of a varied diet, even if it's plant-based, we can typically get a better absorption of iron if we're also having vitamin C containing foods. Most people who aren't menstruating anymore don't need a supplemental iron. So, or, men don't need it. So I always kind of recommend, if people are doing a multivitamin with minerals, like if you're, no longer getting a cycle, to choose just the regular version, or like the Centrum Silver or something like that for women. And that typically doesn't have any iron in it. Now, there's obviously some people that need more, like after certain cancer treatments, different things that you might be going through with your medications, but that's something that your doctors will typically review with you.
I don't know if it was you or somebody else mentioned vitamin C can enhance the absorption of calcium too? Is that your understanding?
I haven't seen that, but I can look that up too. So I'm looking up calcium. I'm looking up, what was my other thing I'm looking up? Oh, iodine. No.
Iodine and thyroid.
Yeah. And then
Thanks. I would love that to know these things. Yeah.
calcium, vitamin C. Okay. Great. And then zinc. So zinc is vital in our immune function, growth and development, wound healing. Found in meat and seafood. Oysters are actually a really high source of that. Typically recommend cooked oysters, even though people might not enjoy them as much, but there is like more of a risk of foodborne illness with those raw oysters. Also found fortified in cereals, dairy, eggs, beans, nuts, whole grains. So it is in a pretty wide variety of foods. Copper. So copper, important in energy metabolism, antioxidant defense, found again in those organ meats and shellfish, nuts, seeds, legumes, whole grains. We don't see a lot of deficiency of copper in this country. So that's not really something that we need to even be thinking about. And then obviously just a bunch of different recipe ideas again. So I'm going to I'll stop sharing, and then we can get into our recipes. Does anybody have any other questions on the slides? All right. So let's start with our recipes. Sorry. I'm dry from the allergies. We're going to start with our vinaigrette for our spinach salad. So we're going to do 3 tablespoons of lime juice. So this spinach salad, like we talked about, we have our pepitas, which are very high in magnesium. We have our baby spinach, which has a good bit of magnesium as well, along with a little bit of calcium. We're going to get also some iron from the spinach. Our strawberries will help absorb that iron. And we're going to have some feta cheese, which has a little bit of calcium. So I like to do feta cheese because it has such a strong taste. So, when we're doing cheese, we don't want to do like tons of cheese. It's very calorie dense, has a lot of fat in it. But things that have a very strong taste, we often need a little less of, right? So feta cheese is definitely one of those cheeses that's very strong, and a little bit goes a long way, which is nice. And this salad is great just by itself. And then also if you want to add any additional like protein, like chicken or tofu or hard-boiled egg, it could be a really nice balanced dinner option. Okay, so let's see if I have 3 tablespoons. Yes. Nothing like the smell of fresh lime juice. So fresh. Perfect. Great. Now we're also going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then we're going to do a tablespoon of water. I always like to do water in my salad dressing, just when it needs a little bit more liquid, but you don't necessarily want to add more fat. It's a great way to kind of just reduce the total fat. If you find a recipe that you like, you can always play around with it. Add less salt, add less oil, add some water to replace it, add less sweetener than it calls for. You know, we can always adjust things down to kind of make it a little bit of a better profile. And then I have 2 teaspoons of honey. And honey is also one of those things that has a strong flavor, right? So honey, I find a little bit of that also goes a long way. Unfortunately, I thought I had softened it, but it's hardening back up a little bit. I'm gonna try to get that to stir in. Okay. That's about as good as it's gonna get with my honey. Great. So now let's get the salad finished, preparing. So we're gonna do 6 cups of baby spinach. This container roughly has 6 cups in it, so I'm just gonna dump the whole thing here.
Also, somebody, I don't know if it was you or I go to a nutrition thing also, a Penn, but
Nice.
somebody had said that spinach in particular, was it interferes with the uptake of calcium? Did you?
Yeah, we just talked about a little bit
Oh,
about
that's what you just said that. You just said.
phytic
I
acid.
thought,
Mhm.
but I thought it was spinach in particular, like other things like kale did not interfere as much.
Some might interfere less. Most do still have that in it. I can see if there's like a list of some sort that I can pull out when I look up that information for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's still like very good benefits to it. So, but yeah, like I do think like collard greens is a little bit less. I'll look that up for you too.
Thank you.
Sure. Right, so I'm doing a cup of strawberries and I'm just quartering them. There's also just all kinds of ingredients that are coming into season pretty soon around here, right? Well, spinach is already kind of growing around, but strawberries will be in the next like month and a half to 2 months. Okay. So I think I have about a cup on here. I'm going to add my pepitas. So I didn't add any salt to this salad. The pepitas do have a little bit of salt, but not a ton. But you can notice, like, you know, it's pretty cool to have a nice salad with no sodium, with very little sodium, other than the natural sodium that's in your spinach. minus the pepitas and the feta, but you're not adding any through the salad dressing. So we're doing a 1/4 cup of the pepitas. And then we're gonna do a 1/4 cup of the tofu, or I mean the feta cheese crumbles. If you're vegan, there's also some really good recipes out there for like making a tofu feta cheese. So that could be a fun option. We're still gonna get some calcium and some protein. And we're just gonna put our dressing on. Give it a little shake and we're good. Okay, so we have our spinach salad ready to go. And that's about 4 servings in there. Okay, so now we're going to make our energy bites. So I love these. I do a couple different varieties. The other variety that I do is peanut butter and canned pumpkin. And so this I'm going to do banana and almond butter. So if you like the idea of that combo, you can kind of swap it out in equal amounts to this one. Pumpkin, I usually use a little bit more, maybe just a tiny bit more of the canned pumpkin. It's not as loose as the banana is. So right now I'm going to mash up a banana. I'm going to do about a 1/2 cup. So these are a great thing to have on hand. They're perfect like to make for somebody that's maybe going through surgery or treatment, or I take them like to friends when they have babies, just because they're really easy to eat, nutrition packed little bite. I do keep them in the fridge because they are pretty moist and I don't want them to grow, you know, any mold or anything fitting out. Let's do a 1/2 cup. Do a little bit more of a banana because I don't quite fill a 1/2 cup. The other thing about this is you'll note that really the only sweetener addition to this is my dark chocolate, my chocolate chips. Like I'm not adding maple syrup or honey. It doesn't need it because the banana is so sweet. So you're going to have very little added sugar in this recipe. So our banana has a lot of potassium. Our almond butter will have some calcium and some magnesium. And our flax seeds have some of that as well. And then we're going to have our oats, which I know we've talked in the past about that soluble fiber, which is so good for us. Here's my oats. Here they are. This out earlier. Just old-fashioned rolled oats. I'm gonna do 2 cups of these. And I do only have a half cup down here, so I'm gonna do this 4 times. These also freeze really well, so if it's just you and you're making this recipe, you know you won't eat it in time, you can freeze a portion of it. Third cup of ground flaxseed. We'll do 2/3 cup of almond butter. I'm gonna do mini chocolate chips in here first, though. So I'm gonna do a 1/3 cup of mini chocolate chips. If you're not a chocolate person, you can always omit this. Okay, so I have my almond butter. I'm just gonna mix it up so it's not just all the oil at the top. Always a process. You could certainly use peanut butter too, even for this recipe. I have to deal with this a little bit more later. Okay. And we're just gonna mix it up till it's all in basically like a dough. The cool thing about using oats like this, and also for like overnight oats where you're really not cooking it, it really has a chance to have a lot of resistant starch in it. And that is just really good for our gut health. Really, that like microbiome that we talk about really helps to build the good bacteria in our guts. Okay. Great. So now I am gonna put a little bit more of these. I had a little bit more of the bananas I'm gonna put in. I'm gonna wash my hands really well, and then I'll kind of show you how to roll these up and what kind of portion we're looking for with them. And if I'm making these for other people, I'll typically wear gloves, but just for me and my family, it's fine. Let's see. So we're gonna roll these into about 1/2 inch to like 3/4 of an inch little balls, so about that big. And each one has about like roughly 100 calories in it. So, I mean, it is calorie dense. It's a good snack that will help fill you. Sometimes I'll eat just like a couple for breakfast. And this should make about 15 or so of these energy bites. Great. So that's All right, it's a little short today, but that was what I had for today. Does anybody have any other questions?
I have a question about calcium.
Okay.
A little bit late while you were talking about calcium. Is it easy for the average person eating an average diet to get enough calcium just through diet, or do I need to supplement? I've got osteoporosis, so I'm always wondering how much calcium I'm actually getting and whether I need to take some supplement.
Sure. So I mean, when you have osteoporosis, I usually recommend like listening to what your doctor's recommending because they usually have a little bit more of a supplemental recommendation, like, get it from your diet plus do this much supplements. But for the average person, it is possible if they are consuming, I would say, either a calcium fortified plant milk or like some type of dairy product, at least one serving a day. If we're not doing any of that, it's a little bit harder for sure to get enough.
Okay.
Yep.
I had a question about the balls that you're making right now.
Mhm.
The bites, would they do better if they're refrigerated before you
Yeah.
eat them? And I'm assuming you will keep, oh, it did say on the recipe, keep them in the refrigerator.
Yeah. They're definitely like a little bit loose. They're not as loose once they're in the fridge, which is nice. They kind of like firm up a little bit. Um, and for me, they just taste a little better when they're a little colder and more put together. And like I did also mention it in case you missed it, that you can also freeze it. So they do freeze well too.
Why do you add flaxseed in there? What is the nutritional advantage of flaxseed?
Sure. So adds a little bit of fiber. Ground flaxseed has, and we usually do a ground because the seeds themselves are so small that we don't really break them down. So it also has a good source of the plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, and has a phytochemical in it that is pretty good for us called lignin. There's some research that shows it helps to lower blood pressure. And it also kind of acts as a little bit of a binder. So it kind of just helps the way it's set up. It just kind of seems to help these form a little bit better too.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I'm just gonna rinse my hands real quick.